There was a story that I saw early this morning, and honestly, I thought it was like a nothing story. And as the day went on, it went sort of viral, and a lot of people are talking about it. Now, it hits me in the corazon because I feel like I'm at that range, that age, that point in life, that coming to age, where I ask myself a lot about, do you stay in your lane or do you make adjustments to stay relevant? We always say relevance is a choice.
Correct.
And I think there's a middle ground where it's probably a little of both, right? You got to stay in your lane sometimes. You don't want to be forced out of the club. You got to know when to say when. You don't want to be the old guy at the club.
Yeah, you don't want to be the old guy at the club.
But you also don't want to be
the guy rocking
old before your years.
But you also don't want to be the guy who's the last new music you listen to is Pearl Jam and you're rocking Carpenter jeans.
So here's the story. And it sort of ties into sports. We're going to explain. Hot 97 does something called the Summer Jam. The big summer show. Every city has their own version of this. Hot 97 Summer Jam featured a lot of new artists like Doja Cat.
Don't do that again.
Doja Cat. Sexy Red, whoever the hell that is. I honestly don't know. That's okay.
Is that Ed Sheeran's new name?
Yes. A lot of new acts. And they welcomed Method Man and Redman to the stage.
METHOD, man.
Where the F you at? To Cal. So Method Man's doing his thing. Redman, again, legends that we grew up with, right? Wu-Tang Clan, Method Man. I love Method Man. I love Wu-Tang Clan.
I learned yesterday, I always thought it was, you don't want to F with Wu-Tang, also Tommy Pham. You don't want to.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with Tommy Pham. He's nothing to F with.
Yeah.
So Method Man, legend. Redman, legend. Method Man, from the slums of Shaolin. Wu-Tang Killer Bees. We on the swarm, right? Method Man and Redman. They made movies. Redman from New Jersey.
Yep.
So grew up loving these guys.
Brick
East
City.
Coast. That's right. And they perform, and nobody's vibing to their music. Nobody's vibing. Nobody boos them. Let me make that clear. But you see the shot from the crowd, and no one's dancing. No one's cheering. It's like crickets. And they're playing all their hits, and they're in unison. They're dancing. They're rapping. They're trying to get everybody involved, and nobody cares.
When they do this at clubs and arenas, by the way, the places go nuts. Like, you know what I'm saying? So,
like nuts, like Trump at UFC nuts.
Yeah.
Like the crowd goes wild.
Because it's a little bit of an older crowd, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, this is the Hot 97 Summer Jam.
Even teenagers at the Summer Jam.
So it's sort of a deflating feeling, right? And it's deflating to me as a fan of these guys growing up because it's a reflection of where we are a little bit. A lot of people listening, they're like, what? Come on, that's still cool, no? And that's how we feel about Eminem this week. There's a big generation gap about the conversation about Eminem because we're like, yo, that new Eminem slaps.
We talked about the new Eminem yesterday, Houdini, who's breaking records. The song's streaming #1 everywhere. But a young woman like Mary, who works here, 22, probably 22 years old, she's like, yeah, he's washed and old.
Tired geezer rap. I keep hearing that on social media.
So
but the numbers prove different because everybody's listening to it. But there's a lot of young people that are saying, yeah, it's whack because they're used to a different style of mumble rap, I guess, or whatever is good now. They don't like Eminem.
There's always a weird selection about what gets retro. Like you're talking about these same Zoomers, a lot of them, thanks to them, nu metal had a revival. Nu metal, which I liked nu metal, but I know a lot of people of our generation think that's corny. Nobody likes nu metal. Nobody likes Limp Bizkit.
That's
Nobody
corn.
likes corn. But like somehow that's had the revival.
It has. You're absolutely right.
That is adored. Wu-Tang and Eminem are not.
And the proof is here. So Method Man and Redman perform. They're deflated, and Method Man goes to social media after the show. And he goes, not our crowd at all. Thanks again, New York, the whole tri-state. Everybody that showed up to the event, plus Pete and Ebro. I got love for you guys, but never again. He goes, at this point, the generation gap's too wide. Too wide for me. Hashtag never coming back. Now, I think he handled it like a man because he could have said, or like an adult, like a mature adult, which is what he is now.
Yep.
He could have said F you to the crowd. Like, yo, what's wrong with you guys? You're
Come
not feeling
on!
Method Man?
Yeah.
Yo, what's the matter? But he did his thing, and then he said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm never coming back. And this is the key part of the story. The key part of the story is, at this point, the generation gap is too wide for me. He's not saying I'm too old. He's saying there's too much of a generation gap, too much of a difference. There's a disconnect, and it's very large where it didn't exist as much with us. Like, we would have been vibing a little bit to our parents' music for sure because they passed it on. Nobody vibed to Method Man. It's deflating. It's disheartening. It's sad. So we came up with a theory based on Eminem this week, based on Method Man this week. How does this tie into sports?
Well, it's simple. When you look at music, that generation gap separates people. Makes you feel like you're on an island by yourself. Like, this is my music versus your music.
Penn Island.
And that's where you live.
That's where you go every spring break.
Music separates people, where sports bring people together. A 22-year-old could talk to a 52-year-old about the Baltimore Ravens and become best of friends. Very rare you're going to see a 20-year-old and a 50-year-old talk about music and be like, yeah, we're on the same page. Sports brings people together. Music sort of points out our generational gaps. The same way Method Man's not connecting.
Certain things get passed on, certain things don't. It's just funny which ones it is. Like, when I was going to college, it was that divide with the boomer music. You know, my dad talked nonstop about Beatles, but that doesn't get passed on. I think Beatles are corny as hell.
You think
But
the Beatles are corny as
I
hell?
hate
Then
the
you
Beatles.
should stop this
No,
conversation.
but I'm just saying, what gets passed on, you know what's
Imagine
cool. You know
what
what's
McCartney
cool.
would think of you.
You know what's cool.
I wonder what Ringo Starr thinks of Prophet.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you know what's cool? You know what's on everyone's posters in college? Led Zeppelin.
Nah, not even
Led
close
Zeppelin
to the Beatles.
gets passed on, the Beatles do not.
Well, it's interesting, too, though. You mentioned the Beatles. The Rolling Stones are selling out stadiums. 65,000 people are showing up to them because they're playing to their crowd. It's also the realization of staying in your lane and playing to your crowd
just
and
ultimately
stop
don't-
trying to cater to people that aren't into you. And that's what Method Man and Redman have acknowledged here. So, again,
But it's humbling too, isn't it?
very humbling.
It's a matter of you don't get to decide what gets passed on. The younger generation decides that for you, and sometimes that just doesn't include you, and you have no power over that. If you go out there and start yelling at the young kids, that'll just make it worse.
It's humbling. It's honest. It's a great reminder. It's reality. It's all of those things. But here's what we're getting at. Both sports and hip-hop, or sports and music, but mostly hip-hop, these are young people games. They really are. Where the industry will tell you when you're done. But sports brings generations together, and music separates them. And the proof is there. Rich is absolutely right. I hear it at the gym all the time. I'll see or at the barbershop, I'll see some old guy talking to some young kid, and they're chopping it up about football. And the young people even respect the old school legends. They'll rock their jerseys. They know the stats. They appreciate the history. Sports brings generations together. Music? Method Man and Redman were giving their all, and none of these young kids were bopping to it. Music nowadays, unfortunately, separates. And Danny G, if you guys don't know, he built his career in the hip-hop world before he got involved in sports. And you have a theory, and you blame the parents. Danny G.
Yeah, some of it is on the parents and some of it is on record companies and owners of radio stations, because the last big hip-hop radio station I programmed, the upper management wanted me to take the classic songs like Method Man and Redman off my playlist and instead put brand new music on more to get those promotional dollars from the record company so it would save them money. So what happened is classic hip hop got stripped off of a lot of radio stations' playlists over these past couple of decades. And so it's hurt, the kids' knowledge of hip hop music.
Yeah, and you have some control, And I do think it's a parent's responsibility to pass on the story of greatness in sports and in music. I bond a lot with my kid over music, but I also introduced her to a lot of that. And coincidentally, a lot of that is new metal that you brought up, Perfett, because for whatever reason, kids today do pick up on that.
Yeah,
they like System. They like Limp Bizkit. They like Linkin Park. I don't know why. But
again, it's not up to us. Like, you can lead them to the stuff. You can show them Method Man all you want, but if they decide they just don't like that, that's not up to you. You can expose them all you want. I don't even think it's a matter of knowledge for some people out there. It's just their choice, their preference. Like, you can lead them to the old classic hip-hop, but if they ultimately decide, yeah, this still just isn't for me, that's not a failure of them not knowing. They just have chosen something else.
Okay,
that's how time goes.
Replace the word knowledge then, maybe nostalgia, because if you grew up...
Nostalgia's a drug.
Well, listen, if you grew up with your parents being passionate about Method Man and Redman and them teaching you all about Brick City and how those two did their Blackout album together and all that, and then those kids heard that on radio stations and vibed to it, they'd have a different history right now than what it is. It went blank. It did black out.
Kids don't always want to be their parents, and I guess the foil to this is classic rock formats, because trust me growing up with rock, I heard all the Rush, all the Journey, all the Boston. That doesn't mean I liked that stuff.
Perfett grew up in Detroit Rock City. Danny G, a West Coast guy. Covino and Rich and Spot were all from the East Coast. And again, that's the story today, and it's gone viral because it's very specific. It's not that they're too old. It's the generation gap is too wide. Yeah, they're older. We get that. We acknowledge that. But it's the generation gap. The difference is just too wide. The generation gap too wide for the rap we grew up with to translate to the kids today. And we saw it twice, and that's why twice in 1 week, and that's why we bring it up to you. With Eminem and now with Method Man and Redman, who got zero applause and zero enthusiasm and zero cheers at Hot 97 Summer Jam. And it's sort of sad to see.
What differentiates it, though, from sports is that for some reason, there is a built-in respect in a young sports fan for the older people. A young kid could be like, I love Brock Purdy, but they'll acknowledge Joe Montana and Steve Young. Some Dolphins fan will be like, oh, Dan Marino was probably the best. Some little kid that never even watched him. You talk about the NBA. I mean, can we talk about Michael Jordan more for a guy that hasn't played in 30 years? You know, like 20-something years? Like, goodness.
Kids who never saw Michael Jordan play
talk about him.
Are rocking his kicks and still talking about him as the GOAT in the NBA, and they've witnessed LeBron. You know, so, yeah.
We're intrigued by Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, guys that some youngsters never even watched, yet they'll bring their name up and show them respect. There's a level of respect in sports that is given. It's wild. You talk hockey, Stanley Cup's coming up. You hear the legends' names all the time. In the world of, I'll give you another example, even too. In sports entertainment, wrestling. What happens when The Rock or Stone Cold or Hulk Hogan or one of these old-timers comes out? The crowd goes nuts.
They get the respect.
There's a generational respect where music, for some reason, because you know what it is? We attach ourselves to the music of our generation.
It's the ownership we have
and we
of it.
own it.
Yeah.
I once read a great article about how the music that was popular when you were a high school junior until you were a freshman in college or, you know, on your own at 18, that 15 to 18-year-old window, whatever you connected to, you are convinced is the best. You're convinced. The same way you thought 90s rock was the best. Yo, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, all that. Some 80s dude's like, you kidding, man? Dude, it was about Whitesnake. The same way some guy in the 70s thought his music and some guy in the 60s. So the same way Mary here at Fox Sports the other day was saying, like, no one's better ever than Kendrick Lamar. You're always going to adopt who your guy was or your woman was.
Sports brings generations together. Music separates. But I also want to give credit to, again, because it ties in together. We said sports and hip-hop, both young man games. You both, in both areas or arenas, you have to know when to say when, I guess, or else you start to embarrass yourself. And you got to give props to Method Man for having the wherewithal and the self-awareness to say that he's never coming back. He's going to just play to his crowd where people love and respect him and cheer when he performs, I don't know, the Rock Wilder with Redman.
I really wish there was an MTV that kids right now grew up with, focused in on it, because my example would be our middle kid. He wore an Outkast t-shirt, but we laughed because he didn't know Outkast was a rap group.
Never saw a video, nothing.
So I had to go to YouTube and show it to him because there is no music channel that the kids are sitting down watching every day. Once he saw a couple of their videos on YouTube, he's been hooked and bumping Outkast ever since. So there has been like the dark side of the moon on some of this music.
Why does this story resonate? Why has it grown throughout the day? Why has it gone viral and passed around? Because it makes us reflect on, wait a second, the guys who we thought were the coolest, nobody was even like acknowledging them.
But to Rich's point, I see Joe Montana clips all the time.
All the time. And
so that's another reason why sports has the forefathers and has the respect, and the kids know about it.
So that's
I think
the
it's
story.
just a styles makes fights kind of thing. Like at the end of the day, because again, like, how do we then explain Limp Bizkit coming back? It just, whatever the style is, just gets latched onto. It's bizarre. It's bizarre.
It is. We don't know the blueprint for why things hit with certain generations,
You go with
but
the
it
tide.
does. But again, I applaud Method Man for not taking it out on the crowd, because I'd want to. What's wrong with you guys?
I'm Method Man.
I'm Method Man.
But yeah, no.
I'm surprised he didn't lose it. Imagine that empty feeling. And they went on with the show, and they did their thing. And you know what? They'll get their props and flowers, as the kids say, in front of an audience that does respect them. They just have to stay in their lane.
Well, I gave you the example this morning. It's a matter
Moving
of staying in
forward.
your lane. Sports is universal. To reiterate that point one last time, sports universal, music generational. You could talk to, like I said, a 20-something-year-old Raiders fan could talk to a 50-something-year-old Raiders fan about Jim Plunkett. One will have lived it, and one will have watched highlights and want to talk about it. Music, a lot of times you want to dismiss younger people's music and you want to dismiss older people's music because you think your music
I'll tell you what, though, Rich.
is
Do you
the
ever
best.
see some weenial out there wearing some Wu-Tang apparel? If you ever see some weenial with a W Wu-Tang shirt on, you got to tell them to take it off, because you give them no respect.
Well,
you don't deserve to wear it.
I also said to you earlier that there is a space for this, right? Whatever you do, whatever genre of music you're in, if you're an artist, there's someone for you if you were big at one point. I gave the example to you off the air of New Kids on the Block. Yeah, who cares about them anymore? I'll tell you who. 40 to 50-year-old white girls.
And they're staying in their lane.
And they stay in that lane, and they sell out,
hey, you
not
think
big arenas, but they sell out small arenas, and they do cruises and this and that and make a ton of money. Wu-Tang, Method Man just needs to be like, yo, there's clearly going to be a place for him to prevail at Hot 97 Summer Jam, where the headliners are young artists. Unless you sell it as, and we're bringing back our retro artist, Method Man, it's just not going to work.
There is one thing you can probably do, and I think we've seen it with some crossover stuff. You just work with younger artists.
Yeah.
Like Billy Ray Cyrus worked with Lil Nas X.
Yep. And Elton John did a song with Britney and Dua Lipa and all. Elton
it
John
definitely helps to reintroduce yourself, for sure. And, then kids are like, who's that old guy with Kanye West? But still, now they know who Paul McCartney is, right?